when people are like, okay, you should do this to coffee and that and this to the processing, this step, second step, I would say 80% of the time the coffee, it gets not good, you know?
Hi, everybody. I'm David Paparelli, co-founder of M-Cultivo, and welcome back to the Cupping Table podcast, where the best coffee producers and buyers share their stories, insights, and outlook on the specialty coffee space. Our guest today is Jorge Castro, the Director of Production and Sales of Inmaculada Coffee Farms. He is an industrial engineer by training, which he utilizes in his process-oriented approach to coffee production. And it seems to be working. They have multiple titles behind their coffee: World Barista Championship, World Brewers Cup. They are famous in particular for their pioneering efforts with Eugenioides, among other things. And I think his biggest accolade, he would never claim this, but I think he's the most frequent guest on the Cupping Table podcast at this point. So congratulations for whatever that's worth. Jorge, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, David. Thank you, M-Cultivo team.
Thanks for joining today, Jorge. So we start these with the same question. What's your favorite cup of coffee or the best cup of coffee that you've had recently?
Okay, recently, I think it's different than the last question. It was like my best coffee that I have tried or my best memory. Recently, I will say a natural aerobic Sudan Rume that we have in the cupping. You know, we have, except Eugenioides, like our top coffees of the farm are geishas and Sudan Rume, and they have way different profiles. So it's very interesting to have this fruity coffee that is natural and aerobic, you know, with fermentation. I'm a very fan of the clean coffees, very elegant coffees, but Sudan Rume is a crazy complex coffee. Like you can have a lot of different red fruits, stone fruits, banana, yellow fruits. It's like a tropical punch when that coffee is really well processed. So we are very glad that we are seeing that I would say our new generation of Sudan Rume, because we almost replanted a lot of the area of the farm, is getting really well.
What makes that coffee so complex on the cupping table in comparison to all the other ones that you guys produce?
I don't know what is happening with the Sudan Rume. I think it's similar to Eugenioides. When you process that coffee in the washed process, it's having a way different profile to the natural Arabic. But when I mean way different, it's crazy different. For example, in the geisha, when you have a natural Arabic in a well temperature and everything, you still feel the floral and the oranges and the citrusy. But in Sudan Rume, it's changing crazy. Like I will say, the washed up the honey expression is very like yellowish greenish flavors, and then it goes to all of the pink, red, like oranges flavors, but everything clash together. Something does the processing in the flavor of that coffee, just a natural anaerobic in a stable 18-degree temperature. We do around 4 or 5 days depending, and the flavor is amazing. So also the altitude, of course, but it's a coffee that is very expressive and also have some spices and a really good body. So you know, it's like a very interesting explosion of fruits. I don't know the why of really the why of why those coffees are changing so much in the processing, but there's a really interesting thing that, for example, both Eugenioides and Sudan Rome Brix are not that high as some other varieties. So who knows? Maybe something
So
is
so the
happening.
Brix level isn't super high. So the sugar content of that coffee is lower than maybe the geishas that you produce. It might not be the sugar content that's making that coffee wildly different, but you're saying based on processing method, the coffee is almost unidentifiable from the other coffees. So is there a processing method that you're using for that coffee that you think it favors? Is this a common problem for the coffees that you grow?
Yes, actually, it's the same thing that happened to Eugenioides at first. That was around 2018. That what we were doing was to get the best expression and flavor out of the coffee, respecting the genetic and the terroir. Like at first, you start in the basic stuff that is doing a wash, a honey, and a natural. And in the washed honey and natural, you see which path you can get. When you do the washed and the honey, coffee still get like that green wood taste, like that very minty and greenish, but pushing flavors. Some customers like them, but in general terms, those flavors are not very supported by customers or roasters. And that was the same for Eugenioides. But when you put those coffees in the natural, the coffee starts to get better, like more sweet and more body. But not anaerobic in this time. We only do natural, but it was a bit of the hint of those greenish taste. So we start to go that path and test different lengths on fermentation and temperatures. And we get into a point that the best expression of both coffees are natural aerobics in different lengths and conditions. It was the same for those two varieties. It's very interesting actually. For the geisha, it was totally the opposite. It's like when you start pushing the anaerobic and doing tests, you are taking away a bit of the complexity of what people are expecting of a geisha. Elegant, fragrant, citrusy, lemongrassy coffee.
Yeah.
But in the case of Sudan Romeo of Eugenioides was getting the best expression out to see what we could do. That was 2018. We started on that process, and in 2019 we have like a stable knowing that we have to go into the natural aerobic. We just have done the same process, moving temperatures, moving length, and also adapting new mechanics and techniques. Machinery and also techniques and way of measuring. But this is what we have done on those two varieties. Yes.
It's amazing, and I hadn't thought about it that way, but it is amazing what you just said there, where if you grow geisha as a variety, there's an expectation for what geisha should taste like, and that's going to be jasmine, bergamot. It's going to be the sweetness. It's going to be body. It's going to be all those things that people think of geisha as. If it is not those things, then why am I buying this coffee? What are we doing with this, right? What's the application, right? Whereas as you experiment with new varieties, I mean, you guys got famous for Eugenioides. It gives you a little bit more leeway because there is no expectation for how a Eugenioides should taste because a lot of people have never had Eugenioides, right? And so I don't know if I mean, does that motivate you to experiment with new varieties because it just is a more interesting problem to solve, I guess, using some of your engineering language?
Yes, I mean, we had some varieties that not that much producers had it at that time. 2018. It was a different time in specialty coffee. So let's say in a process and engineering point of view, the objective was to make the best out of it. You already have it, and I'm even talking about Eugenioides and Sudan Romero because at that time we didn't knew the potential, mainly of Eugenioides, the potential of that coffee. So you have the plot. You have at that time we had 1.5 hectares, a small plot, and the coffee flavor was not getting that good when it was washed. It was very light, like very like grassy, the flavor of the coffee. So it was not very good. But you have the coffee. It's a exotic variety. It's non-existent in the country at the time. So you have to do something about it. Agriculture is not just changing the flavor of something. So we started to do a lot of tests in different ways, and of course we didn't have an expectation of what the outcome will be more than getting the best out of it,
Hmm.
having the best out of expression of the coffees in general that we have. So that was the path we followed, and we still following that when we do even our project fellow farms. When we process the cherry, when we have a new variety, we do tests on every honey, natural and washed, and depending on the results on the test, we go in one path to change a lot of parameters.
Yeah, so you have a base level processing techniques that you kind of use as here's the processing tree, here's kind of the roots of that or the trunks of those trees, and then you can branch off into the branches to figure out what's going to be best. Interesting way to dial it in, and an interesting thing to do with most varieties. I don't know many producers who have that sort of, I guess, freedom or opportunity to experiment that way. I would be curious on how much you utilize the market or your network of coffee buyers to determine what is objectively good in these coffees. What is your favorite, or or is it kind of more obvious than that? It hits the cupping table and it's just everybody's in agreement the natural is better than the honey, better than the wash, and we really don't need our network of buyers to tell us what's good or not good. Can you talk a little bit about how the market impacts the decisions that you're making around these coffees?
Yeah, that's very interesting because it's like how you balance your value proposition on the versatility or the demand of the customers in each market. At first, we believe that there's coffee for everyone, because as you can see, market trends. Well, there are some trends, but market is worldwide, and depending on the market, they are more keen on one coffee or the other one.
Mhm.
What is There is something that is very like something that we do see in the market is that for specialty, like top specialty farms, people are expecting new things like every year. So it's like what you have new, what you have new. So it's kind of hard for a farm to have new things every year and new flavors because at the end, it's nature and it's agriculture. So that is one thing that we are seeing. And the other thing is just to try to move on that new things that they are expecting, but within our frame. And we have our frame of respecting the genetic, the terroir of the coffee, and having the best expression out of it. So what we try is trying to balance those two things, not to stick very much to our how we do things, but we can change a bit, not doing the same every time, but also understanding that what is our proposition of our value purpose on Immaculada, that is
Mm.
showcasing the best expression of each coffee in a natural way, that you can feel the genetic, that you can feel the variety, and that you can actually perceive a specialty coffee and nothing added, respecting the nature. So that's what we usually play with. Sometimes we do special lots for some customers that they want, why don't you do a washed geisha, for example? So we did start to doing washed geishas, but in fellows, but not in the signature series, because our signature series coffee in naturals, in score, and when you cup and the body and the sweetness, they get almost better every time than the washed. And if you compare to another country's washed, some of the most of the times they're better. So we try to stick on our process that has been showcasing a different profile at like it's still geisha, still the lemongrassy, citrusy, but it has a unique taste of the sweetness and of the pineapple, and that's like you can try the coffee in a table and you are like, okay, this is a different geisha, very sweet one and very yellowish. That is not the usual white green geisha that you find, for example, in Panama. So that's like the things we play, but we do talk a lot with the consumers, with the roasteries here and the green buyers, to try to adapt and to get into a point, but always getting into our frame.
Yeah, so you have to determine what to put on a cupping table in front of a buyer, right? Which needs to be things that fall within kind of the Immaculata framework, which is sort of that North Star by the sounds of it. But I do think you guys have sort of an interesting, and this is sort of an outsider's point of view, just observing Immaculata and what's gone on in the market with Immaculata. So tell me where this is wrong, because I know this is an oversimplification of the story. But for something like Eugenioides, right? There's this element of risk in planting that variety, making sure it does well, figuring out the processing technique. And then all of a sudden, boom, Eugenioides is being used in competitions. World Barista Championship, World Brewers Cup. It's going nuts. I mean, you had finalists. At one point, it was something like 3 or 4 out of the top 5 finalists had Eugenioides as the coffee they were using for a competition. It was something insane like that, right? And then from there, you guys say, okay, well then we're getting all this demand and buyers for Eugenioides. Let's plant more of this stuff and let's try and fill more of this demand. And then you kind of it's almost like you have this like stages of R&D. Like you have this kind of low level R&D. Let's plant a few trees and let's see how this whole thing goes. And that's like real R&D exercise, super risky, who knows what's going to happen, to competition environment, let's dial in this coffee for competition, which is a whole nother element of R&D, to now we're going to bring this to more of a commercial exercise if this needs to be available to more buyers because there's such high demand for it. And the demand is so far outstretched the supply that there's a rarity to it. Does that follow the Eugenioides journey somewhat? Where am I wrong on that? Because I know that's an oversimplification of it.
No, actually, it follows. It's interesting because it even follows how the project started. We are in Pichinde, that's near Cali, in Colombia. We're in the Western Mountain Range. And the idea of starting the project of the owners, that are the Holguin family, they have a house there in that area, but just to go in the weekends and to visit because it's a very nice place. So they say, okay, let's do something so the people can dynamize the economy here, and they started to review a lot of things. And one of things was coffee, specialty coffee. But what you plant and why you plant, like it at that time 2011, it just was a bet. It's like, okay, let's put something that is not the same that Colombia plants, because the idea was to do things differently, because Holguin Ramos family, they have been in the agro business, but in massive consumption product, like sugarcane or palm oil, but they wanted to do something totally different. So the idea was, okay, let's put different varieties and we can see how it goes out. And they just divided the land, and we planted 4 varieties, Laurina, Eugenioides, Sudan Rome, and Geisha. And actually, all of the varieties, they went well. That's a first conclusion, of the terroir, or on where they are planted and how they are managed. And then we start also reviewing how they can get better and better with the processing and all of the data. And we get it to a point that the coffee taste well in certain process better than the others, and we stick to that, and we do that with every variety. For example, even if when it's a variety that it's very common, that it's already good, or people are expecting something. For example, we just planted a Pacamara and Sidra Bourbon, but we are doing the same. It's not that we are doing whatever process you can find it in the market. No, you have to see, and you have to review how this coffee is tasting in the different paths of processing, because at the end, that's the beauty of coffee. It's not the same everywhere. You can have your own signature. Within the frame, like I was telling. Like, this coffee can be better in this process here in Colombia or in our conditions. So it's very about measuring things and understanding where to put that coffee and getting to the best expression. And it was actually, Eugenioides, for example, when it won, like following what we were saying, we didn't expect that kind of boom. We just expected to do the best we can with the coffee. Try to showcase the best process. Okay, so people were asking for samples for competition, this and that, and at the end, the coffee just won. So it's like we were not looking for that, like, top three in the 2021 barista championship. We were just looking for pushing the coffee to get the best expression out of it. We were not even looking for a competition product line. Now we know that the market is different in a certain way, and the competitions are working different because they have maturated and stabilized in a certain way. So they do want some type of coffees for barista. They do want some type of coffee for filter. So we also have to adapt to that trend, to what is happening to our process. But everything thing is measured and doing the best we can at farm, then to test it in the market. So that's like our vision always.
What coffees do they want in competition? I mean, is that something that baristas kind of come to you with a request? I mean, I could see at this point that if a barista came with a request, I mean, it's almost like someone. It's like me showing up to a 3-star Michelin restaurant and telling the chef how to cook. I mean, it's like, this is an outrageous. This is ridiculous. Let me farm. Let me do the production. Let me run the cupping. I'll give you some samples, and you can make a decision. But is it something where you guys are actually kind of getting feedback and trying to figure out what works in competition, or have you dialed that in at this point? I mean, how would you describe those competition coffees, barista versus brewers versus for anybody out there trying to get coffees into competition?
Yes, I mean, I always we always communicate with the customer or the brand that is supporting the barista, and the point is you in your specialty and where you are focused in roasting and you are focused in barista and serving people, you let me know what you are looking for, which flavors are you looking for, and then let me do my best because we do work here in the farm, so it's
Hmm.
like you let me in your knowledge, this is what you're looking for. In my knowledge, this is what I can do, and I send the sample. Because in our experience, when people are like, okay, you should do this to coffee and that and this to the processing, this step, second step, I would say 80% of the time the coffee it gets not good. Like when we follow what they should do, or okay, you can put some music or you can do this and that with the coffee. It's like, okay, I will do it. At the end, they are paying with the coffee for the coffee, but it's very important that the knowledge that we have learned is of farm. But some customers, that other 20, there are some of them that they are very keen in knowledge of the farm because they have been doing trips, they have been learning. So in that way, it's very nice when they go to our farm and to our place, and they say, okay, this is how fermentation work. We have this strain of yeast that we take from
Yeah.
Indonesia or whatever, and that is a good way, because they show they know about coffee, about fermentation. It's like, okay, we can do it. So nowadays we are more looking towards that side when they want a custom, like a custom process, but in the other way, it's just okay, let me which type of profile of flavors you want. I will send what we have because that's why we have the product lines only focused in specialty coffee and exotic varieties. But it's not just like playing around, getting crazy, because that's actually not easy.
Right. Yeah, it's sounds like it's a little bit choose your own adventure, but it's not completely broad open. You kind of force people into these product lines or these lanes, and then within, again, that Immaculata framework that you develop, they can make some decisions on what they like. But if I'm hearing you right, Jorge, it's really matching the coffee to the barista and not so much matching the coffee to the competition, which I find so even more strange that Eugenioides kind of took the world by storm in the way that it did, because it means that I guess there's a profile of barista that really selected this coffee and they just happen to be the best baristas, the brewers in the world. I mean, I guess, is that sort of how that played out? I mean, was that shocking to you at all that that resulted in that way? I know it wasn't the end goal for you guys, but was that shocking that you achieved this weird milestone that no one has ever tried to attempt?
Yeah, I think it's all about the flavor at the end. You are sending the samples. At that time, we did have some nice production, so certain quantity. They tried the coffees and they found the coffee crazy different than a usual coffee, because it's a species. When you see the plant, nature is beautiful in those matters, because when you see the plant is different in all of the all of the things, different leaves colors. The flower is super small, the bean is small, the tree shape is smaller, the root system is way more smaller, so it's a weaker tree. The way it adapts to the weather condition is also different. So everything is so different that at the end is reflecting the flavor. It's a 9 to 10 Brix content. A cherry, that's nothing of Brix if you compare it to even 17, 18 to Pink Bourbon, for example. And then the coffee is super dense, different to roast, different profile, like crazy different profile, because it's a coffee you almost don't feel the bitterness. So when you don't feel the bitterness, you have different experience at the end, because in coffee, the coffee, you feel a bit of the bitterness, at least. It's a coffee you put in blind, maybe even in a tea session, and people will say like, oh, maybe it's a tea. So it's something very interesting because it's unique. And at that time, they were using varieties that they were known, and then this species enters. Also, it was more or less the same time that they started to work with Liberica, and you can see that it was a trend on both because it's a way different profile. It's a new thing, so it's like the introduction of a new type of flavor that the judges they didn't know, the barista they didn't know, and they were playing with it. So it was like also we were visited by best roasteries at that moment, people that they have are really skilled baristas. So there was a lot of variables that together in that time.
Yeah, it's just so much of this is timing, and you just have to. I've heard it described as a wave, right? You almost have to catch that wave, and if you miss it, you missed it. You got to catch the next one, and that's going to be something different, right? I mean, with you guys, I'm going to again oversimplify this, but I enjoy talking to you guys about your process. In kind of a normal product development for, I mean, I guess any business. And again, I'm probably going to butcher this completely, but it's something along the lines of develop, launch, get feedback, iterate, develop, launch, get feedback, iterate. You kind of it's these loops, right? And you're kind of going through these iteration loops and these cycles, and I can kind of hear that in the way that you're framing Immaculata. What I think is unique about what you guys have done is you figured out ways to accelerate yourself through those loops. I mean, collect data faster, get feedback on the farm faster, do things in a more structured manner. But I would be interested in just asking kind of the obvious question that is, what are the key elements for accelerating through those iteration or development loops for you guys? I mean, how have you been able to do that that's different than your coffee farming neighbors?
Okay, that's a very important question because at the end we are following like if you don't measure, you don't control. If you don't control, you don't get better. So that's something we have to follow in every step of the process in every area. More than a farm, because we do have a farm and we do take care of the soil and agroforestry system and everything is like in the bigger scope, managing all of it as a factory, as a company. Everything has to be measured, everything has to be in data. So talking about how to test on the coffees and what is different, what is key on it, is having different tools. For example, when we receive the cherry of a certain variety, we have all the data collected, even like the picking date, where do it come from, like the farm, the lot. Also, we can even see who picked the coffee, and that sample we measure it. We also put it in the information of that SKU, and all of that information is collected on every coffee, even fellows, even our own coffee. So we can have all the data and we can review what is the best. For the test, what we are doing is we have exact SKU for testing that is before it's the P. So P1, P2, P3, whatever. It's like prueba test. So at the end, every test we are doing, we are not selling as operative sales. We are just copying it in a different copying table, like we do copyings only of tests. So we do the test copyings and we see what you did with each coffee and if it's working or if it's not working. We have a mobile application. That's also a very key element. I mean, it could be just a software, but what mobile? Why mobile? Is because you are in the farm, you are in the field, you are getting data that you cannot go with the computer everywhere. So we are gathering data with cell phones, put into our mobile app, and the mobile app also have a version for the computer, and we can download the data and everything. So that's a thing that has helped us a lot. We have even do a lot of changes of it, and now we are getting into a point that we even need to adapt more softwares that can talk with that mobile app because things are changing. For example, the technical sheets of the coffee. So there are some software that they have really beautiful technical sheets of the coffees, and they can do the copying of everyone and the average. That's not our mobile app. So maybe we can connect with it. We are just growing on how to understand data, how to read the data, how to put different things to understand what is happening. And understanding what is happening, it's data. So that's that. I will answer the question like how you get into that really quick. It's understanding the what is happening, and you understand the things by numbers. Because if not, coffee has a lot of numbers. You can have a lot of numbers. You can have a Brix, state of ripening, where it comes from, even weather conditions at that moment at the lot. You have the humidity of the coffee in parchment or in dry cherry. Then you have the water activity in green, the density in green, the humidity in green. There's that much data that if you want to do it by hand, it's then to do the analysis of that, it's a mess. So you just need to have a lot of software and databases, so you can do it quick and efficient. So in that way you can actually test and see and review if it's okay, if it's not okay, or putting a coffee in a product line, in the other product line, a quick operate. That's like the key for us.
What attributes of coffee or what data points in coffee you feel that kind of the coffee, the specialty coffee industry or the specialty coffee world is overvaluing? Basically, they love to talk about it, but in reality, it doesn't have very much impact, or it has less impact than people think. Is there anything that you guys have found that you know people bring it up and you kind of roll your eyes?
I would say Brix content is one that is not giving you a correlation with anything COP score. That is one. The other one that is very overhyped is the variety, because at the end is not just the variety, it's where the coffee comes from and what is the data of the coffee. I have even tried a beautiful Castillos, but this is something that is more complex than you think, because at the end is something that also is about market. But if we talk about specialty coffee and the taste and the cup score, I will say also variety. That's why blindly copying is very important, because sometimes you even try some coffees and they are geisha and they are not tasting like geisha. But if they tell you it was a geisha, then maybe you will score higher. So I would say variety is one of those, and the Brix content that we have seen. Some of the important ones that really affect, like in correlation, that I have seen, is the weather condition. How much sunlight, it affects a lot the quality of the coffee. Too much sunlight will get the quality down. Temperature, also density of the cherry and density of the green, that is correlated. It's extremely important, and because also the density is made by the altitude, because the bean is slower getting into the ripening stage, so it has more mass in the same volume, and at the end it packs more flavors, like doing just a quick summary. And we have seen that those ones are really important for us. Water activity for the shelf life, humidity, for exporting, and have the things very balanced, knowing when to stop the drying and everything. But more than those two, let's say, variables that are variety and Brix, that are a bit overhyped, or maybe the process too, because the process, it doesn't, I mean, it's a step, but you don't depend on the process to have a good coffee. You can have a good coffee in any process, and to know if it's a good coffee, you can know in different variables, not just the process or the variety or the Brix. Yeah, that's one of our conclusions so far. But we are learning more and more and more day by day, and gathering more data. That's our goal.
It's interesting to look at pricing in relation to what you just talked about. I mean, if you look at, we run auctions, and on those auctions you kind of have the lot information, right? And that's going to be things like variety, there's description, there's processing method. Um, Obviously there's origin, or there's coffee growing region. There's these kind of characteristics that we would say, okay, and you can look at the correlation of those characteristics with price. And variety, sort of the first binary element is it geisha or is it not geisha historically, right? So that's binary. If it's geisha, it gets a higher price. If it's not geisha, it doesn't get a higher price. Now all the other varieties, things like Katimor or Katura, those are Katuai, those are probably going to be lower on the list now. But if you start comparing, an SL28 to an SL34, I mean, it's going to be, or name the variety. Eugenioides versus an SL28. I mean, it's tough. I mean, so we obviously don't have enough data on Eugenioides, so I can't make that claim. I should take that back. But it's the same with origin. It's binary. Is it Panama or is it not Panama? You get into this. And if it's
Yes.
not Panama, then it's kind of like, well, coffees can go for relatively the same price if you look at all the data, which is interesting. So I think what you're saying is super fascinating, just because there are outliers. Obviously, there's going to be outliers in anything, but it is broadly reflective of how the market is kind of trending. It likes things that are rare. It likes things that are novel. Like you mentioned, people are chasing novelty, but that's not it's not a specific thing or a specific set of characteristics. It's kind of like you have to find the best coffee, which is super subjective, which turns this from a science to kind of an art form, which I think that's where you guys have done a good job, is this blending of science and art in this processed approach. The team that you put together is a team of craftsmen and artists, really following a process to get to an end result. But there still has to be decisions that are more art leaning, you might call it, than science leading. Do you find that to be true?
Yeah, actually, I would say there's a big gap between the variables that are important for farmers and the variables that are important for buyers, and that's the gap of education, and that's something that is a reality that we have to adapt. So you have different variables and language to sell the coffee than to review the coffee and get better in the farm. So for commercial issues, it's more about process, varieties, things that are like you are saying, more art and novelty and more beautiful language, marketing language. So it's just adapting marketing, knowledge on it, product lines, showcasing for example, what we do in the farm, the varieties, the pictures. But at the end, not all of that is the things that are affecting exactly to the quality in the inside, really, or what is happening in the farm, and it's understandable. It's very hard for a consumer to understand how you get a good coffee out. They just want to taste a new thing, or to taste a sweet thing, or to taste acidity or whatever. So how you put it easy for them, how you put it easy for them, like in a technical sheet, for example, or this coffee is tasting like this, and it was dried in several days, or in a different way in a carousel. The process is a natural anaerobic, or even some people, they for example, they name the processes, so it's a different process, or it's just a marketing techniques you adapt to your commercial area. But at the end, if you don't have all this back end of things, you will not have a good coffee. So it's very important, like, to have everything understandable, because the mind of a consumer, even a green buyer or even a roastery, is different from the farm, So it's important to understand what are the needs of them, which variables we can get for them, and then what are the needs of us to get coffee better, what we have to measure, and how to correlate them, and also speak to them as the language what they are used to it, and what they are looking for, more than all these technical things, how many days it was stored, which conditions, or the weather condition, or the density. Sometimes people, they don't want to hear that. They just want to cup the coffee and to see, okay, it's a natural geisha from Immaculada. So yeah, trying to have a balance within those two variables, or those two things.
Yeah, that is worth mentioning. You brought up there that the one consistent attribute that almost is a requirement to be there is the quality attribute. Now that starts a whole nother debate on what is quality and how this. But I think there's some level of at least calibration or agreement around what is the difference between a good coffee, an excellent coffee, and an outstanding coffee. And even if people don't agree with CVA or the SCA cupping sheet, or name your importer's cupping scoring methodology, right? It goes without saying that, it's almost like when you see it on the cupping table. Like, this is when something's actually outstanding and it really pops and jumps out. And it's so hard to kind of assign that, but that is that is really consistent. And I think the other thing that you're bringing up there that is super interesting that people do undervalue just because they live it every single day is that translation is required. And that's not translation from English to Spanish or Japanese to Spanish. That's translation from what is the buyer actually asking for here? I mean, they're using words like, I want I want red fruit in my coffee, or I want, that it tastes like red fruit to me, or it tastes like you brought it up on this in this conversation, which I think is so interesting. You're not talking about flavor notes a lot of times. You're talking about colors. Oh, that's a white green coffee, or it's a yellow blue coffee, or it's a these
Uh-huh.
kinds of ideas where conceptually I understand what you're talking about, but that's just because of sitting in between these two folks. What advice would you give to folks that are kind of trying to build into that translation element so they actually know what the heck the feedback is from the market so they can begin to adapt their processes and their coffees to fulfill that?
Yeah, and that's very important, because when they go to like exact descriptors, it's very hard to understand. It's like, for example, the lemon for you tastes different for me, or I don't know, the bergamot, or it has happened a lot, like the oolong tea. At one time, when I started in Inmaculada, I have never tasted that, so it was kind of crazy
Yeah.
how you can understand like the market. So it's easier to put it by profile or colors, like in general things. It means it's like I don't know, dark red type of flavor. So it's these red berries. If it's dark, it's more ripened. So maybe it has to be more fermenty and it has more body. So it's more of creating like a mindset of what the consumer wants to translate it into the process. For example, like you were saying, I want a coffee that tastes like lemongrass. Then how I do that in the farm? It's not like putting a flavor. So it's so you can understand like those type of flavors in which, for example, this greenish and white flavors, how you get it. So maybe you can have a very clean washed coffee in a variety that is very floral and elegant. Yeah, like some in some way to adapt to the needs in a more practical way in the process and to understand.
Have you found specifically that buyers tend to resonate or understand what you're saying faster when you start kind of using colors as flavor categories? I mean, is that worked for you guys? I mean, using that kind of white, dark red, bright, I guess you'd say bright white, green, like these kinds of conceptual ideas of what flavor should be, and then let them determine that, yellow coffee is really that's oolong to someone in Asia, but to somebody in Colombia, that might be, I don't know, would it be papaya fruit? I mean, whatever it would be, right? Has that kind of conceptual framework worked for you in articulating flavor notes? Do you kind of force your buyers into that?
It's very nice because there's a frame that is the wheel of the flavors. So
Yep.
in the wheel of the flavors you have all of the colors, and when you say a color, then you go into the wheel and you more or less know that, well, there are a lot of flavors in that color, and you can seek the one that you were
Works for
thinking
you.
there. So
Yeah.
there's a frame on it, so it's interesting.
Yeah, I love that. And I do I'm sure I've heard it before and I'm just too dense to have picked it up. Cuz when you taste a coffee, I think, there is some calibration or just humanness around cuppers or people that when they taste a coffee, they do kind of say, okay, it I don't know what, but it's kind of somewhere in the red fruit, stone fruit area. What it's not is it's not green apple. Like it's not in this greener kind of, leafy green apple. Like it's not in that area. And there's some agreement, I would think, on that sort of dynamic. So I love that. I think I'm going to take that with me on that element. But I do want to talk about these auctions coming up you have going on. So you've got Colombia Legends, and Colombia Legends. This is the first time this auction or an auction like this has occurred. To my understanding, in Colombia, we have talked to Mikava in the conversation, so we've gotten a little bit of a rundown on this, and we've talked to Vicente. from Clear Path about it as well. But I'd love to get kind of your story with Colombia Legends, and you know how are you approached for this? What did you think of the concept initially, and what are you excited about with it?
We think as a team it's a very interesting idea. We were contacted by ClearPath team. We know them from 2 or 3 years. Daniela Maya from ClearPath was texting us that they have this idea that they were cooking. So if we were interested in in getting into there, at first I told them, my Inmaculada brand is very on the clean coffees, on the genetics and the terroir. So let me know what is the idea. Well, like in a summary, because we were very, let's say, if they put us in the same auction or line of a coffees that they have flavors added in different techniques, we will be thinking that's not fair. So
Mm,
if that was happening, we will say no. But we have the discussion and everything, and they were having two different colors or lines. I think even in the box they are separated by color. So they were having this idea of like the ones that they do like things the same and trying to express the most out of the coffee in a very natural, clean way, and the most innovative. Well, that word is very interesting, on what is innovation, but let's put it in the way, a very different way than the common way of doing things. So actually, in that way, it was very interesting for us. Why? To see how our coffees are competing in terms of the best coffee producers in Colombia, or not the best. Let's put it this way: of one of the best that we are there in the genetics and terroir, and one of the best that they are in different way of doing processes with different things.
mhm,
Co-ferments, infused, everything. So it's very interesting to see and to have as a market test of how is market working in that niche that is even more niche when it's an auction. So we will see and we will test how people are reacting to the segregation of the coffees, because at the end they have the full box, so they can, and it kind of we kind of were we fear, because when you put all of those coffees together in a table can be tricky, because when it's a very intense coffee, can cover all the flavors
mhm,
afterwards. So it's a test of how the customers that they want to go in auctions, how they do this, how they try, how they test, what they value. So it at the end is a very interesting idea to see how is the reaction of customers in this niche of Colombian coffees, because Colombia, I will say, is one of the most controversial countries at this moment, in between very classical coffees or very intense different type of techniques coffees. So, and it's only Colombia, so it's amazing to see how it's going on, what is the reaction of the market. We did send some Sudan Romea and some Eugenioides a bit on it to see how it's going on. We are still, very okay. I don't know what is going to happen, but we must see. That's why we were also, let's say, sending coffee to that auction. We must see, because at the end it's what is happening. So let's see how our brand gets there, how our coffees gets there on the actual coffee scene in Colombia, locally in Colombia.
and what's kind of the thesis that you hope to prove out with this auction? I mean, it seems like in your mind in the conversation, there's these two types of competing forces in Colombian coffee. One is more innovation, advanced processing, this kind of idea. The other is, purity, call it old world Colombian coffee versus new world Colombian coffee. This kind of idea. I don't know if that's fair framing. That's using wine language, I guess. But
Yeah,
what do
yeah.
you, yeah, what do you, what do you hope to prove with this? I mean, is there an outcome that you expect to surface?
More than to prove, is to review. We want to review what is happening in Colombia in the expectation of the customers, and at the end you will review it by price per pound. So in those two brackets, what is the price per pound? Do people want to buy this type of coffees at those type of prices, or only the natural process classic techniques? So it's something that we want to know, and that's very interesting. And I think it's not only for us. Maybe you can see it in the because as a specialty world trend. Because I mean, Colombia, well, we are like pioneers and in big scale in innovative and different techniques. But you can see if people are willing to pay a big quantity of money for which coffee, because all of the producers are there. Let's see what is going to happen. It's more a review, and at the end is amazing because this auction will do that review, because in another way I don't know how to do it, or how to see it,
But
because we don't have the data.
you don't seem like much of a gambler. I could be wrong on that, but I don't know if you spend your holidays in Vegas. But if you were a betting man, what side would you bet on is going to have the higher average price in the auction?
No, of course on the clean coffees, because
There you go.
no, I am expecting that, because you expect that, yeah, that people understand like the effort in the field, in the agronomical part. But who knows? At the end, market is market, and they will show what is happening there. So let's
Well, if
see.
I know anything, the answer is not in the short term. It might be definitive, but in the long term, it's probably not.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's sort of the idea of, I brought this quote up to the team recently, but it's this Voltaire quote that uncertainty is uncomfortable, but the position of certainty is absurd. You don't walk out of these kinds of events or these kinds of apex kind of auctions, Colombia Legends or anything else, and say, okay, one and done. Like, we're good. Like, we learned all we need to learn. Time to move
Yeah.
on. No, it'll turn into an exercise of refinement of, well, why and what can we do? So this is the second year you'll be in the Dubai auction as well. And this is a fascinating one because in this auction, you have producers all over the world. And when we initially came up with this idea, we thought that there would be pushback on the idea of putting, the best of Colombia against the best of Panama, against the best of Ethiopia, against the best of Yemen, and kind of, putting them all on the cupping table and having the same problem that you're kind of talking about struggling with within Colombia, but on a global basis of, well, what if the Yemeni coffee is incredible or the Ethiopian coffee is incredible and we don't stand up to that? That never seemed to be a concern from anybody we invited. And I don't know if I've asked you that question directly of why isn't that a concern in this auction? How do you kind of process through that to say this is a yes, we need to participate, and there's going to be other good coffees on the table. So what? Our coffee's good too.
When the producers that are sending the coffee, that usually are producers that they have go around the world in the markets and see, they have reviewed that coffee is amazing in every part of the planet, that you can have a good coffee in any part, and they are different. So it's like, at the end, it's like food, in each country you can find good food, different profiles, even with the same ingredients. But you can find really good food, you can find really good coffees in all of the world. The thing is that the difference will be in Colombia. We have this segregation of New World and Old World, that you were like you were telling. But
You're going to
but if
use
you see
that. It's
worldwide is
terrible phrasing. I wouldn't market it that way.
but and you see worldwide is different, because worldwide is more like, okay, we keep doing the things we do. We just send it. We know that we are doing our effort on the coffee. Let's see how it goes. It's like more in a more calm way. You are not reviewing that much things, more than reviewing, like, it's not reviewing how the market is. It's reviewing which coffee is better than which by the customers in a frame that all of the coffees are good. So let's see. That's a amazing fair competition. That's the way we see it in a certain way. In the other way, you are very concerned because it's like when you see only Colombia, it's like a picture of what is happening in the present. It is not what will happen. It's a picture of what is happening now.
What are you excited about for Immaculada in 2026? What are you most looking forward to?
Okay, we have a lot of objectives to achieve. Like in a very engineering point of view, is processing more coffee per month. That's something we want to achieve because it's something we want to get in bigger and bigger scale. That in a general term, and in a more specific term, we will have more coffee because I will say we will have the second generation of planting in our farm. Since 2 years ago, we start to redistribute the area of the varieties. We learned where to put which varieties depending on the condition, this and that, and also redistributing the area so we can offer a more constant quantity of each coffee. So that is something that we are very happy to see, that just the production growing and growing, because we are getting to the productive phase of the coffees we planted. Because 2024 and 2025, it was a year that with very small production of our own farm. That is for us the most special coffee to do tests and to play with, because it's the coffee like the more altitude. It's our coffee that we have the factory nearby, and we are that it will be very interesting to try and see more tests and even to showcase a new product line for the competition, for example, because we need more coffee for that. And we are very excited about that, excited about getting 2 or 3 more varieties also to test. They are getting into production, so and also to see how the production goes up and up until they get into a balance point that we can balance it out uh, for the years. So that's what we are excited about.
New problems to solve. It's excited about the problems. I love that about you, Jorge, is that it's kind of the excitement isn't what we're going to achieve. That's not really the goal. That's not really the destination. It's the journey, right? It's what problems are going to arise in 2026 that we're going to be able to solve and find answers to, and then what's going to be the next problem that comes up. I think that's a great mentality to have as a coffee producer in general, because it's not without problems, it's not without challenges from listening to coffee producers from around the world. Ever, it always is something, right? So appreciate the enjoying the journey aspect of it. So ClearPath is hosting the Colombia Legends auction. Immaculada is in that auction. It will occur December 1st through the 3rd. Register now. By the time this podcast comes out, the sample sets will likely be sold out, but you can check. If they are sold out, you can attend a cupping. You can check Immaculada's social media. They're on Instagram. I know that for a fact. And you can check ClearPath as well for cuppings happening around the world. You can also look at M-Cultivo.coffee on Instagram, or go to M-Cultivo.com to check out the ClearPath Colombia Legends auction and register for that. Immaculada will be featured with Eugenioides and a Sudan Rume. Both look incredible. Immaculada will also be featured in the Dubai coffee auction by the DMCC Coffee Center, and that will be happening in January. So those auctions will happen January 18th through the 20th, live at the World of Coffee in Dubai. It will be available online. We will have sample sets going on sale soon, and it is a heck of a lineup of producers this year. So those sample sets will be worth ordering, worth tasting through, and that auction will be worth registering for, even just to watch it happen. Really exciting stuff, seeing all these producers come together and do this beautiful event. It's just a worldwide collaboration and partnership that we've really enjoyed turning into an annual event. So anyway, thank you so much, Jorge, for the time today. Thank you for your contribution to the coffee industry and what Immaculada does and what you do personally to make especially coffee just a better place to live in and work in.
Thank you very much also, David. You are very welcome. And also thank you for thank you the M-Cultivo team. It's amazing to work with you. And this is a very nice space to discuss very interesting topics.
Great to have you back and do all that. More to come as always. We will talk to you soon, Jorge, and we'll hopefully see you in Dubai again.
Okay, thank you very much.